Dear participants of this Riga Jūrmala Festival Masterclass, our honorable Latvian in Western Europe, Mischa Maisky, it is a huge pleasure to be together, although we are not together due to various circumstances. Modern technologies have played their positive part in our life, and we are here and we are eager to exchange ideas, exchange inspiration, and gain as much possible knowledge and inspiration as we can from the best of the best, from the experienced and the inspirational. So I am absolutely talking about the person whom we relate to very much here in Latvia and who is an international cello and music-wise generally a superstar, Mischa Maisky. Sir, it is an honor and pleasure to witness your ideas and witness your musicianship, and we will, during the next hour, try to exchange some musical insight and to gain some ideas which have migrated through the centuries into 21st century. But first and foremost, for all who are watching, we would very much like to appreciate and enjoy Mischa Maisky's unique musicianship. And in this case, it will be an equally unique piece of music, one of the 6 Johann, Sebastian, Bach cello suites, composed in the 18th century, magically survived throughout centuries until Pablo Casals rediscovered them, and then absolutely rightfully gained their place in the concert repertoire. In this case, in the repertoire of Mischa Maisky and in ears of all who are tuning into Riga Jūrmala Festival Masterclass. Now here in Riga and also in Belgium, 2020, July 8th, sorry. Mischa Maisky, do your magic, sir, and later on, please, let's meet for a talk. This is the place where the applause should be. And yeah, let's do that. On behalf of all the participants of the Masterclass and the Riga Jūrmala Festival Masterclass itself, as well as all the listeners, I would like to thank you, Mr. Maisky, for this precious and generous gift you just presented to us. And although you are currently not in Riga or Jūrmala or other your beloved concert places here in Latvia, we still can say that, yeah, Mischa Maisky performed almost in Latvia today. So thank you for that as well, sir.
Pleasure.
Mr. Maisky, if we kick off our conversation, and I will let the participants of the Masterclass voice their questions in a bit, I would first like to ask you some personal questions about Bach and yourself, because considering the fact that this composition and other suites of Bach must have been your trusty companions throughout the decades, could you recall how did you meet those pieces? When was that moment, that probably quite unique moment, when you first encountered, for example, this Bach's first cello suite in G major?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare properly. I should have brought from my studio downstairs the score, the first score that I ever received as a present from my late brother, who was 6 years older than me, and who was absolutely passionate about Bach, and that's why he switched from violin to organ, harpsichord, and musicology. And when I was about 11 years old, he gave me as a present this score which I still treasure, because it has not only the printed edition, but as well the facsimile of what at the time was believed Bach's manuscript. Later was discovered in his copy of Anna Magdalena, but incredibly so his wife had identical handwriting. So actually what you see in the back of me is the Allemande from number 6, one of my favorite, most cosmic pieces, which is always with me around here. And I could have showed you this score with dedication, but you'll just have to believe me. And ever since I was basically introduced to these suites and to most of Bach music by my incredible older brother, who unfortunately left us long time ago, much too early. Anyway, and ever since I slowly started playing them, but it took really quite a long time until I attempted to play all 6 of them. And it's interesting how my taste in interpretation of the suites changed over time, because I remember when I was about 13 or 14, I for the first time heard a recording of Pablo Casals. And by that time I already knew a recording of 2 suites, number 2 and number 5, by my great teacher Rostropovich, who did it quite early, these 2 suites. And of course for me this was the ideal interpretation. And when I heard Casals, I was shocked, literally. I thought, oh my God, what is he doing there? It really was just incomprehensible for me. Then some years later, I heard it again by chance, both of these recordings, and I still prefer Rostropovich, of course, but I start hearing something in Casals' recording which was not maybe so crazy after all. And then years later, it's amazing how these recordings were changing, which of course they were not. My perception of it was changing. And eventually I realized quite a few years ago, when I heard again complete suites by Casals in a remastered digital version, I was surprised how much I was influenced by Casals, after all, more than probably any other interpretation, even though I have at home by now well over 55 different recordings of these suites. I heard all of them, some of them quite a few times, of course. And it's interesting how different, the greater the music, the more different it can be played, of course, and it doesn't come greater than this, and so that's how it is.
Mr. Maisky, I wonder how throughout the decades you have been coping or maybe addressing various trends exactly in what you mentioned, how to play the Bach suites, because historically informed performance has emerged in the 60s and in the 70s. There is the strong romantic tradition. You obviously have your influences in your both magnificent titanic pedagogues, Rostropovich and Piatigorsky. You yourself have your own trend. How do you think, what would the young Mischa Maisky of late 60s, early 70s think about Maisky's interpretation in 2020? Would he thought, oh, it's outrageous, what is he doing? Or would he think, oh no, he makes sense? I mean, how have you evolved?
It's very hard for me to say how me being 15, 16 years old would have reacted to this I cannot say. However, about my own evolution, I can tell you a little story. The reason I recorded the suites again, 15 years later to the first recording, was because I heard by chance in a stereo shop, while trying some speakers, among different recordings, I heard Bourrée from Suite No. 3 in C major, which to me sounded like somebody was making fun of me. It was like caricature, like somebody. No, because I knew that nobody played certain things but me this way, but it couldn't be me. But I discovered it was my recording, which I didn't hear for many years, and I was shocked. It's like seeing a picture of yourself 15 years ago with different color hair and whatever. And that's when I decided that I should do it again, because it wasn't representative anymore. And when people ask me how these two recordings compare, in my opinion, I always say that the second one, which I did about 15 years later, in my opinion, it's about 15 years younger. Strangely enough, if I would compare without knowing, I would definitely say that the earlier recording from 85 was played by older men. And the 15-year-old year 2000 is much more flexible, fluent, and so I even make joke about it that if maybe one day I will record it again, maybe I will start playing like a wunderkind.
Basically, you have grown younger throughout the years, as much as I can understand.
In certain way, yes. I know it's hard to... I try not to look in the mirror to see color of my hair. But I feel, in a way, much younger these days than, let's say, 47 years ago when I started my new life in the West, when I left Soviet Union. Because at the time I was almost 25 and I felt so old. Because last 2 years of my life in Soviet Union were like 20 years of life experience. I spent 18 months in jail, labor camp, and then 2 months in mental hospital, which we'll get into this. But for 2 years I couldn't even play cello. And so when I came out and I didn't speak a word of English or any other language. I didn't play cello, I didn't have a cello. I had to start everything from scratch, like new life. And I felt incredibly late and old. And now, maybe having young children, my youngest daughter is 5 years old, my youngest son is 7, then 11, 15. It helps in a way, and anyway, I feel like I had a wonderful life, and I hope the second half will be even better.
Sincerely wish you what you just said. But before I let the participants of the masterclass ask their questions, I still wonder, and also I will probably make the conversation even less musical and more philosophical. I apologize, and I try not to offend you with that, but especially considering you just mentioned that in the tender age of 25 you felt as an old man or an older man. Looking back at those years, and I must reassure you and maybe comfort you that your hair looks just as crazily beautiful as always. The color does not matter, sir. But do you feel that you have missed something in your life that, because especially with this crazy speed, as American stand-up comedian Dave Chappelle calls this the age of spin. The information constantly spins around us and through us and makes us very anxious and at times eager to try to make the most of the moment. Do you feel that you have tried to do that, or you try to stay out of this crazy flow? Please try to answer the unanswerable.
Yes, it depends how I look at it, because, as you mentioned already, I was incredibly lucky to study with both Rostropovich and Pitigorsky, and my time with Pitigorsky, for example, was only 4 months, but it was incredibly intense. It was the end of his life, and he knew it, and it was beginning of my new life. I was full of positive energy, and he loved speaking Russian. He spoke beautiful Russian. And at the time, I hardly spoke any English, so of course we communicated in Russian. It was the last chance he felt for him to share his incredible life experience, which was probably even magnified by his fantastic imagination, with someone who was very anxious to absorb it. I was like dried out sponge, soaking it in. So it was very intense and on many different levels, not only musically. We spent almost every day several hours together walking, going for walks, talking about anything. And he was incredible gentleman. He always found very refined way of giving advice, not just like this. And in connection to your question, I remember once we were walking in the park and he spoke to me about Stravinsky, with whom he was very friendly. And he quoted Stravinsky telling him at the end of his life, Grisha, I suddenly realized I don't have time anymore to be in a hurry. And at the time I thought, wow, yes, it's kind of cute and nice. But it took me quite a while to realize how important advice it was to me, indirectly. Because as I said, I felt so old, so late, jumping on the train which was already moving. And I try to do things much too fast, and of course when you try to do things too fast, the result is usually the opposite. If you always compare it to open the faucet too strong and trying to fill up this glass with water, it will be always half empty. And so it took me a while to realize and to slow down, so to say, in certain ways. And of course, it is like everything else in life. The modern technology, internet, and it has incredible advantages, and of course some dangers and perils. And we have to try to use the best part of it and avoid the negative side of it.
Thank you for this answer. Sir, I think this is the due time to add the students of Jāzeps Vītols Latvian Academy of Music to the conversation. And we have prepared questions for you, but I am obviously not in control of the minds of the students, so they might very well ask some random questions or ad libitum improvised questions. So let us start.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Maisky. Yeah. Pleasure to meet you.
It's my pleasure.
So, an age-old question, I believe. First of all, do you experience stress while performing, even in this age, with this experience you have? And do you have any advice how to cope with stress for younger musicians who haven't had so much experience in their lives?
Of course, there's always stress, and hopefully most of it is positive stress, because I enjoy playing on stage, particularly, of course, for the audience. Nowadays it's different. Playing like this, it was already better than nothing, as we say, to have you knowing that you were somewhere present. But of course, the energy, this exchange of energy with the audience, for me, is extremely important. And it helps a lot. And then, of course, depending on what I play and the repertoire, and depending on my physical condition, or obviously it varies from day to day, it's never the same. And naturally, experience does help. But then again, one could make point that with age, it's not getting easier. So enjoy being young, although I feel very young in spirit in any case, and that's the most important thing. See, I met Pablo Casals. I was incredibly lucky to meet and play for him when he was 96 and a half years old. 96 and a half years young. It was 2 months before he passed away, and I played for him for an hour and a half. Bach number 2 Suite in D minor, Bach Sonata in G minor, and complete Dvorak concerto, which is quite unbelievable actually. I myself hardly can believe it, but it's true. And he spoke a lot, and it was amazing, the spirit of youthfulness which he kept despite the years. And I always say one of my greatest ambitions in life is to live very long, but to die young. So enjoy it.
Hello, Mr. Maisky. Also a pleasure to meet you. The question I wanted to ask you is, so because I personally have some problems as well, let's say, so because you're an active musician, do you ever have any problems with your health? So does your back hurt or some stuff like that? And if yes, how do you deal with these problems?
Of course, we all have sometimes issues, some kind of health issues. I try to be very philosophical about it, because there is saying, of course, for you it's again difficult to relate to this being so young, but there is saying if you wake up next morning after your 50th birthday and nothing hurts, it means you're dead, because it's totally natural. And but I must confess that strangely enough, I have less problems now than before. I used to have low back issues sometimes, and once when we moved to a new house and I was myself putting some furniture together with a screwdriver, I developed tennis elbow, although I don't play tennis. and it was an issue for a while. Yes. And last year I went ice skating with my 6-year-old son at the time. He was 6. And it was first time for him, and I was very excited to show him, because in my youth, growing up in Latvia and playing football for youth team of Daugava, during the winter times we were playing ice hockey. So I was very good on ice skates. And but while filming him ice skating and going backwards, I fell down and hurt my shoulder. And ever since, it's not the same. I must confess that I feel it even now. But you know, it's not so bad. And of course, one has to be careful and try to keep in shape. But it as well very much depends on your way of playing. Because if you're very natural type of player, then, and if you play with emotions, with adrenaline, it helps to avoid physical issues. Because purely physical exercise without any emotional involvement, that's when usually the problems with hands and body more likely to appear.
Okay, thank you.
And no yoga?
Actually, I'm planning to start it usually from tomorrow or day after, next week, next month. No, because I did yoga a little bit a long time ago. But I must confess, I highly recommend. Yoga is fantastic. And my children, older children doing it, and I promise to them that one of these days I will take over again. But being as busy as I am traveling, it's of course just an excuse. It's a matter of time management, and one can always find time if one wants. But I have 6 children. 2 of them, of course, not children anymore, but still, for me, they are. And so to find enough time for my professional life and my family life, it's very difficult to spare time for anything else. But I'm planning to, because, you know, I heard there used to be this black jazz pianist, U.B. Blake, who apparently was drinking all his life, all kinds of things, you know, impossible and impossible, and smoking everything possible and impossible. And despite this, he managed to become 100 years old. Then he died soon after, but when he celebrated his 100th birthday, in the interview they asked him, how does it feel to be 100 years old? And he said, you know, man, if I would have known I'd live so long, I would have taken better care of myself. So I always think, just in case I will live long enough, I probably should start taking better care of myself. So yoga is certainly on my list.
Well, hello. It is also a great pleasure to meet you, although it's on the internet. My question is quite short and simple and straightforward, and it is, when you're in a hurry, do you use some methods or techniques to study pieces faster or to make the practice more efficient? And if so, can you share them with us?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. That the reason, one of many reasons why I don't actually teach as such is because I consider myself half amateur cellist. Because first of all, because as you probably know, in Russian, the amateur it's someone who the same word for music lover, and I still love music. And the other part of my so-called amateurism is that I don't really know very much about cello playing as such. If you would start asking me how do you hold your bow, I usually say, ask me something easier. I mean, what difference it makes how we hold the bow? What's important? What comes out? So there are many different ways of achieving the same goal, and the important thing is to concentrate on the final result, what you want to achieve. And how you achieve it, it's your own business, so to say. It's like a kitchen in the restaurant, which hopefully you never see. What's important is what you get on the table. So then again, question of practicing. It's very personal, very individual, and it's a classic question people ask, how many hours a day do you practice? And it all depends, I always say, what one means by practicing. Because of course it's very important, I don't imply that it's not, to practice with your instrument, to train your hands and mastery of your instrument technique and so on. However, I believe very strongly that it's even more important to continuously train and develop your mind, your musical taste. The taste. So in order for your mind being a leading force and your hands following your mind and not other way around, it's a very important point. So that means that you can practice in many different ways without instrument. By listening to music, all kind of music, not necessarily the piece, only the piece you play, although there is nothing wrong about listening to this piece as well. And not only cellists, of course, and not only classical music, and of course the reading and learning about everything in life, it all helps you to develop your mind, your imagination, and you know, so again, this question of practicing is very subjective and individual. And of course, some people learn things much quicker and others longer. It totally doesn't matter at the end of the day. Nobody, of course, Rostropovich learned first Shostakovich concerto in 3.5 days. This is totally unbelievable, literally. I still hardly can believe it. But he did it and played for Shostakovich from memory. Okay, it's exception. But if he would have learned it in 2 months instead of 3 days, it wouldn't make difference for the audience. Important is what the result is. And so, yeah, one thing advice I can give you again from my age perspective, it's definitely true that the older you get, the more difficult it is to learn new pieces, and particularly by memory. And although I still try to do it, but I must confess that, so I always suggest, if you want, whatever you want to learn properly and from memory, do it before you're 50 or 40 or preferably 30, because it's not getting easier. However, you can play with music. It's a question of playing from memory. You know, people ask me, do you play everything by heart? And I usually answer, I play everything with heart. If you use music, it's okay. Important is to play with heart. By heart, it's, I hope you understand the distinction in English. It's not the most important thing.
Thank you about that, sir. Now, as we are here meeting specifically keeping in mind the musicianship of the experts, of the greats, meaning you, wink wink, but also the younglings, those still in, how to say, works in progress, and people who greatly appreciate your insight. And although you said that you have never considered yourself a pedagogue and try to not to get it too involved in that, we would very much like you to give your impressions on the playing of the guys, specifically the recordings that were sent to you. Obviously, considering the time, we cannot go in too great detail, but if you would be so kind as to point out to the strength and maybe to things to improve for each of the guys, I think I can speak for all of us. We would greatly appreciate that. One by one.
Yes. No, first of all, I must make it clear straight away that when you talk about work in progress, I'm very much on the same road. We are all continuously try to learn something, and because, you know, having young children, I witness this all the time, and they reach 5, 6, 7 years old, they learn so much in a few years, and they think they know everything. Then the older they get, the more they realize how little we know. And in Russian there is expression, you might live, if you're lucky, you might live to be 100 years old, and if you are wise enough, you will learn until the day you die, you will still die ignorant. Because it's true, the more you learn, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. And that's why I will never get bored playing the same Bach suites or the same Dvorak concerto or Shostakovich or Brahms, Schubert, Richard Strauss, name it. Because I always say it's trying to reach so-called perfection in music or any art, it's an illusion. It's like trying to reach the horizon. The closer you come, the more it goes away. It doesn't mean that one shouldn't try to come closer. But as long as you realize that you will never touch it, then there is no frustration. And so that's a very important point, that I don't consider myself that I reached the level of understanding which this music deserves. It's impossible. The other thing about my not teaching, it also depends what one means by teaching, because I don't teach in conventional sense of the word, but when young cellists come backstage and ask after the concert and ask, do you give lessons? I always say, I just now did. That's the best I can do, to share whatever I feel, laugh, understand, and learn about music through my playing. And some other colleagues of mine can do it better through teaching, and some can do both, of course, obviously. And yeah, I think we all have strengths and we all have limitations. It's perfectly normal. Very few people have such a talent as being able to do all kind of everything on the highest level. For this, it's not enough to be just gifted. You have to be almost a genius. There are very few geniuses. There are people who think they are geniuses, but that's when the problem starts. And I think the most important talent is to figure out what your qualities are and what your weaknesses are, and not to do something which you cannot do best. So that's why I don't teach, I don't conduct, for example. I don't do many things, even in cello repertoire. There's certain repertoire which I don't feel I can do justice to music enough due to lack of time, experience, or whatever. And I'd rather not play than play it somehow. And that's why I always say, that's why I keep making children, because that's what I do best. And in my spare time, I still play cello. So as far as the comments about your playing, I did listen a little bit, but not enough really to make detailed comments, which I would be very happy to share with you on some other occasion when we'll have more time. We can still definitely communicate, not necessarily online, and speak about what I heard already, or I hope to have a chance to hear you in person. Not at all, not at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I was rather impressed in many ways. And but then again, you see, it's I didn't touch yet very important issue which you actually mentioned, this different attitudes of, let's say, performing Bach or any music, and this historically, how would you call it, informed, yes. Not yes, authentic. One way to people put it. I always say I'm a great believer in authenticity, but I believe in authenticity of emotions. I believe that whatever is comes from performer's heart at the moment is authentic to him at this particular moment. Then it's a question, of course, of playing Bach the way it was played during his time. Here, I personally, even though I admire very much many wonderful musicians who practice this, and I enjoyed and learned a lot from many different recordings by Anna Bilsma and many other cellists, and not only cellists, of course. And I met Anna Bilsma on many occasions. He was an incredible man, very interesting, very intelligent, very funny, and so on. But I personally don't share the attitude because, in my opinion, it's against Bach's mentality. He was so progressive. He was so much ahead of his time. He was not even appreciated as a composer as much as many other, much less non-composers at the time. He was much more famous as an organist. And, so it took Mendelssohn literally a century after Bach's death to reintroduce Bach's music to the concert. So he was experimenting. I mean, Well-Tempered Clavier is one example. The suites were written for cello, not for viola da gamba. Last suite for 5-string cello, 6 suite, and so on. And I'm convinced that if Francois Tourt or anyone else would invent the modern bow 100 years earlier, he would be the first to try. So I believe that he's, sometimes I even dare to say, turning in his grave, knowing that musicians in 21st century trying to go 300 years backwards. Then again, in the same breath, I always say, I might be completely wrong. Because I never met Bach. And nobody should pretend that they know how Bach would like it to be played today in modern halls, in modern conditions, which are completely different than 300 years ago. So there is, many interesting and funny stories, musician stories, but one of them, for example, with Otto Klemperer and some great singer whose name I shouldn't even mention because he's really great. When he was young, he was performing one of the Bach oratorios with Klemperer. And first rehearsal, he did something in one area different than the score. And Klemperer, who was somewhat paralyzed after the stroke, he said, "What are you doing there?" And he said, "Maestro, last night in my dreams, I met Johann Sebastian Bach. And he told me, you're the greatest, and you can do it differently than I wrote." So Klemperer said, Nothing else. Next day, another rehearsal, the same place, the same thing. Klemperer stopped and said, "Last night, in my dreams, I met Johann Sebastian Bach. He told me he doesn't know you. He never met you." And that's the point we always should remember. None of us met Bach or any other great composers of the past. And nobody should pretend that we know exactly how they would like it to be played today. Because, I have a book by an American philosopher about this whole issue called Authenticities, where he makes very convincing point. Then the whole discussion is basically pointless and waste of time. Because it's the same like saying, for example, that Herr Schmidt in Leipzig in 1720 decided to become a shoemaker opposed to airplane pilot. In 1720, Herr Schmidt didn't have this choice because there were no airplanes. Today, he might have become airplane pilot or still shoemaker. But he would have choice. The point is that Bach never had choice. He had a small orchestra with instruments of the time, and he did fantastically well with what was available to him. Today, this philosopher makes this point. If he would be resurrected today and given choice to perform his music with his orchestra and instruments of the time, or with New York Philharmonic, maybe he would choose his orchestra. But maybe he would choose New York Philharmonic, and we will never know. So my main attitude in life is live and let live. Because there are so many different ways of doing anything, of thinking, of dressing, of eating, of practicing different religion, different ideologies, and of playing Bach or any other music. And we all could benefit from different cultures, different backgrounds, different everything, and learn and enrich ourselves, opposed to being threatened by differences. Now I'm trying to become a little philosophical, it has nothing to do with music, but the point is that if you think about it, most of the wars and conflicts through history until today happens because of different gods, different religion, or different ideology, which is so unfortunate and narrow-minded. And if people would just learn to be more open-minded and tolerant, it will be much better world to live. So there are many different ways of playing Bach or any other music.
Thank you. Mr. Maisky, keeping you to your word that you will later communicate with each of the students individually and be helpful in that capacity. I think we still have time for one more round of questions.
Sure.
Not to make it our conversation, but again to ask their urgent or even more urgent questions. This time, let's start from this side.
Yes, absolutely. I would like to say that I'm open to any questions and even to any answers, because I'm very curious to learn from any experience and any exchange. It's two-way street. So you're more than welcome to criticize my playing and mention or ask anything about it, being this particular performance today or any other piece, not necessarily Bach. You're welcome to ask anything.
Well, okay, then one quick question. Before a concert, when you're warming up, what should you not do before you need to go on stage? Or perhaps maybe what should you do that some people even don't consider?
Again, it's very personal, I personally kind of trained myself most of the time not even to warm up. I didn't touch cello today. I didn't touch cello yesterday. I was traveling all day and spent the rest of the day with my children, older children, and I have 2 new puppy dogs. I could show you. So I have to take care of them. They're only 10 weeks old. And so I didn't touch my cello until I played now, and I could have used warming up. It helps, of course. However, the reason I train myself not to do it is because there are circumstances sometimes before the concert when you cannot do this, because being too close to stage and performance which is going on at the same time, and some musicians cannot play 2 notes if they don't play for an hour scales or arpeggios, and then if you find yourself in a situation and there's no choice, you might really have a problem. But again, it doesn't mean that again, as I said, it's very personal, and everybody has different habits and different routine. But interesting enough that I, of course, prefer, like everybody else, not to travel on the day of the concert and have time to rest a little bit and be in good condition. And then, surprisingly enough, sometimes you find yourself in supposedly best circumstances, and the concert is not necessarily your best. And then sometimes it's exactly opposite. You have to travel until the moment you arrived and didn't sleep the night before, and it can be one of the best concerts you ever played. So it depends on many circumstances and very individual, so I couldn't really give advice. I like to have nice coffee before the concert, but then again, some people think it's crazy. How can you drink coffee before going on stage? They need tranquilizer, so it's...
Thank you very much for the advice. On to the next one.
I wanted to ask you, how was your life as a student? Because everybody goes through that if they, go in the direction of music. And I wanted to know what your life was like as a student.
Oh, my life as a student is going on since 64 years. I was 8 years old when I quit smoking and started playing cello. And ever since, I consider myself a student. I still am studying, as I already mentioned before. But I know what you mean, of course. It was different. It was a very long time ago. And when I went to Military School from 1956 until 1962, yes, when I went to Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and then 4 years later to Moscow Conservatory. First years, even though it was my own decision, my parents didn't want me to become a musician because my older brother and sister both were studying music, and it was enough for them. They wanted to have one child normal. I was anything but normal. No, they just wanted. I started first year. I went to the normal school. I didn't go to music school. But then at the age of 8, myself, something happened to me, and I announced I want to play cello. They couldn't believe it because I was a very hyperactive child. I was running. I couldn't sit more than 5 seconds in one place. I was playing football because football was passion. And they just couldn't believe it. They thought it was a moment of temporary insanity. But I insisted, and here we are, all these years later. However, I had in 2 months to my wonderful first teacher, Mikhail Nikolaevich Johann, prepared me in 2 months to enter the 2nd year of emerita school. And then I continued playing football. Much more than cello, unfortunately, I must say. And it took another 5 years until when I was 13 years old, when I suddenly came to realization that probably I'm not going to compete with Pelé, who was my hero at the time. The same like my boys now, Ronaldo, Messi, and whoever else. Yeah. And that's when I started a little bit more serious studying cello. And of course, when I moved to St. Petersburg, Leningrad, in boarding school, there we didn't have chance to play football, so I had to, and level was quite a bit higher, so I had to start taking music more seriously. And then 4 years later, of course, Moscow Conservatory with Rostropovich was completely different level again, and obviously not only level of students in his class, but altogether, to be honest, I hardly can believe it myself, that not only I was incredibly lucky and privileged to study with Rostropovich at the time, but on a daily basis, we almost literally bumped in the corridors of Moscow Conservatory into musicians like Oyster, Kogan, Richter, Gilles, Shostakovich himself. I met Shostakovich on quite a few occasions. I was in the first performance of Second Cello Concerto on the 25th of September 1966. I remember it like yesterday, of course. And the first performance of his violin sonata with Oyster and Richter and many other things. Some later symphonies as well. Anyway, but what I mean is, I know for you it's probably even more difficult to imagine and believe. So again, it was very different times. However, you have many other advantages which we didn't have. You, through internet, you can have access to some unbelievable amount of information and recordings and scores and which we could only dream of, or couldn't even dream of at the time, to be honest. So, it's again, it's different time, it's different situation, and we all have to try to get the best out of it.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay, about competitions. I know you have been a jury member of a lot of competitions, so maybe you can tell us what are some maybe characteristics of a person or of his or her playing style that jury members are looking for?
Wow, this is very delicate question, so to say, because to be perfectly honest, actually I wasn't a member of jury of many competitions until, what is it now, 6 years ago, 6 years ago, I refused as a matter of principle to participate in a jury. Because I was, first of all, too many times on the other side, so to say. And I know what's going on behind the curtain, so to say. And then again, as a matter of principle, I don't like to judge anybody. Even though, inevitably, if you go on stage, competition or concert, you always are judged by people. It's we used to say in Russian, if you're afraid of wolves, don't go to the forest. So if you're afraid of being judged, you shouldn't go on stage, because inevitably it's... And then again, I changed my mind and went to Tchaikovsky competition twice by now, and in between to Queen Elizabeth competition in Brussels, as you remember. Partly because my older children convinced me that exactly because I don't have students, my own students, and I don't have any interest in this, maybe somehow I can try to balance it out, the whole system, which is not perfect, of course. And it doesn't mean that I have something against competitions, although I totally agree with what Bela Bartok said, competitions are for horses. music is something else, but an art. But of course, there is, like everything else, as I mentioned before, it has positive side. My personal experience with competitions is, I remember very well, that after each competition, no matter what the result, I felt clearly the advance I made, because it forces you to prepare differently than just on a daily basis. And it's an experience, invaluable experience. I mean, playing, as I remember in 1966 in Moscow, Tchaikovsky competition, for the jury, I have still pictures, I recently posted even on Instagram, picture of the jury with Rostropovich, Pitigorsky, Fournier, Casado, Shafran, and many other incredible cellists. It was just, again, mind-blowing in a way. And so you can always learn, and I always say that, when I was first time in jury of Tchaikovsky competition, after second round, the jury selected me to announce the results. And I was incredibly nervous. I'll never forget. I got up and I was looking at them sitting down there, and my heart was saying, dum, 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 dum. I said, it's ridiculous. I'm so nervous. And I told him so. I probably am more nervous than you are. Because even though it was almost exactly half a century, 49 years ago, in 1966, when I was sitting there waiting for the results, I remember this like yesterday. So I told him, I know how you feel. And because the level was so incredibly high, I mean really mind-blowing cello playing, I told him, I feel personally that you all deserve to play in the finals. However, it was impossible. We had to choose 6 finalists. So for those who didn't get to the finals, the only thing I can tell you, it's not the end of life. In my last 2 competitions, I didn't get to the finals. Then I wanted to add, but I didn't, that I still have 6 most incredible children. But that would have been a joke, and that was not a joking moment. What I'm trying to say, that there are many examples of winners of competitions whom nobody remembers. And then again, some great musicians like, let's say, Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli was one of the greatest pianists, who in Brussels got 8th or 9th prize, something like this. Didn't hurt him, or even musicians who didn't get to the finals succeeded. So the results are not the most important thing. And nowadays, particularly, again, because of modern technology and the internet, for example, Tchaikovsky competition is accessible free of charge on Medici TV still. So for everybody who played there, even if they didn't get to the finals, they have chance for exposure, which we, again, in my time, couldn't even dream of. So it's a delicate thing, because the more personality you have, which in my opinion is very important for the performer, the more tricky it is to please everybody, and particularly the jury members or themselves, still very ambitious and maybe sometimes even somewhat frustrated former performers or whatever, and to have very strong ideas about way of playing these pieces. I had totally utopian idea about competition. If I would ever arrange competition, which I never will, don't worry, I would choose for cello competition, I would have a jury from composers, conductors, violinists, pianists, singers, whoever, but no cellists. I mean, again, this is extreme, of course, and probably unrealistic and probably even silly. But my point is of musicians who would be influenced by their own habits, their own strict, narrow-minded sometimes ideas about way of playing this music. So, but so it's not easy to please everybody, but there are exceptions again. Of winners of competitions who do have very strong personality and still might succeed to convince majority of the jury.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for these answers. Well, I suspect that it is most often a good idea to remember not to try to please everybody, because it is quite impossible, as our world-famous mezzo-soprano Elīna Garanč said in one of her interviews. At one time, I had to make a choice either to try to love and please my family or to try to please everybody else, and I chose the former, and I do not regret it for a moment. Mr. Maisky, thank you for pleasing us during this more than an hour, because it was absolutely delightful to both listen to your cello playing and also to have the rare opportunity to talk to you, and more importantly to listen to you talk. On behalf of Riga Jūrmala Festival Masterclass, I would like to thank you, and on behalf of the participants of the Masterclass, thank you for this gift for us. We will now end the live stream, but please do not disconnect from our conversation yet, because we will have some behind-the-scenes questions as well. But for all the participants of this live stream and for all you watchers, we sincerely thank you for tuning in today.
Thank you very much.